From the Ear to There Travel Studio, this is the Ear to There Disney Podcast.
The Ear to There Podcast, it's time to start the show. Be sure to hold on tight, here we go. Exploring all the different Disney destinations. Ear to There, it's time to start the fun.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Ear to There Podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. I am your host, Phil Gramlich, and each and every week I will bring you a different Walt Disney World word and then give you background, tips, tricks, hints, history, all kinds of stuff about that word. Think of it as a Walt Disney World fix in 15 minutes or less. Well, that's what I aim for. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's a lot more than 15 minutes, but I shoot for 15 minutes or less. And this week will be a little bit different. This is going to be a very special episode of the Word of the Week. So, without further ado, this week's Walt Disney World Word of the Week is brought to you by the letter Q. Q for Quirky. Now, already you're saying, Quirky, what does that have to do with Walt Disney World? What does that have to do with your normal shows, right? Normally, your Word of the Week episodes are all about a word in Walt Disney World, like M for Matterhorn, or M for Monorail, or N for Nautilus, or maybe even A for Autopia. No? What about D for Doombuggy? Okay, you may have picked up on some type of pattern with the words I've been using so far. That is the words after Quirky, right? So, if you've listened to my show before, and I hope you have, and if you haven't, there are 160 plus different shows that you can go back and listen to as soon as you're done listening to this one. So, yeah, I've done a lot of these. And wait a minute, where have you been? No, I'm kidding. I'm obviously kidding. But if you have listened to this show before, you know I'm a huge, huge fan of the history of the Disney company, particularly going back decades and decades to the 50s and 60s and the beginning of Disneyland, and then into the 70s and 80s, Walt Disney World, including Epcot. And I love reading about or listening to or hearing about those individuals who were so instrumental in building Disneyland and Walt Disney World and everything that Disney stands for today. So where does Quirky come in? Okay, so I reached out to Disney legend and Imagineer Bob Gurr. It's often been said that Bob has a bit of a quirky sense of humor. See, that's where Quirky comes in. And when I talked to him back on episode 82 of this show, I just knew that I wanted to hear more from him. I wanted to talk to him some more. I didn't want that little time that we had to be up. Bob is a brilliant guy. He's a genius. He was hired by Walt Disney himself. So I kind of wanted to pick his brain and then allow you, the listener, to pick his brain as well. So I did reach out to that guy with a quirky sense of humor, Disney legend, former Imagineer. The guy has a window on Main Street, USA. He's done it all. And I'm very excited and very proud to announce that on each and every episode of the Ear to There podcast and on each and every episode of the Word of the Week episodes, Bob Gurr will be taking one listener's question and answering it here on the show. Yeah, that's what I said. That's exciting. Very exciting for me. Very exciting for you because you get to ask him really anything you want. I mean, I'd prefer if it was about Disneyland or Walt Disney World or even Universal Studios when he built the King Kong animatronic figure. But the questions are yours to ask, so feel free to call the voice line. The phone number is 267-551-1971. That's 267-551-1971. Please call with any questions you have for the quirky Mr. Bob Gurr, and hopefully he will answer it for you on an upcoming episode of the Ear to There podcast. Oh, and before I forget, Bob Gurr's appearances on the show will be brought to you by the Waltland Disney History Bus Tour. So this tour is actually hosted and narrated by Bob Gurr himself. Join Bob as you embark on an amazing half-day magical journey through a bygone era. You'll visit some of the most significant Walt Disney landmarks and points of interest that played an important role in not only the Walt Disney Company, but in the life of Walt Disney the man. The upcoming dates for this tour are Sunday, February 18th, 2018, and Sunday, March 18th, 2018. To buy tickets, stop by waltland.com. And you know what? This isn't just an announcement episode. We're going to get it started this week with the first ever Bob Gurr question. But before I get to that, of course, it wouldn't be the Ear to There podcast without a theme song.
It's What About Bob? Bob Gurr, the legend, creator of the Matterhorn, the monorails and the Haunted Mansion. What about Bob, the Disney legend?
Hi, this is Jen from Florida. I would love to hear. Bob, you're obviously an expert in storytelling. What are some of your favorite stories, Disney or otherwise, and how have those stories shaped your own life? Thanks so much for answering.
Well, boy, I have never gotten that question.
Good.
Ever.
I'm sure she'll be happy with that.
Well, the reason I'm a storyteller is that the nature of the questions to do with Disneyland, which later became, more Walt Disney World, more other subjects, and King Kongs and sinking ships and all that kind of stuff. Just the very nature of the question, asking about what we would say is amusement park equipment, usually is very unique, and it usually has a very unique backstory. So as you're trying to describe the backstory, especially if you were there, and more particularly if you were the designer, some of this stuff becomes automatically entertaining just in answering the question. But to be more specific, when I would start doing stuff about 35 years ago where there's an audience, I was very aware of how engineers will answer a question, and you watch the back row and they're all asleep. And I made a mental note to myself, the day I have to answer technical questions to an audience, I don't want anybody going to sleep, so therefore you have to be an entertainer. So being able to be on a stage and be 100% comfortable with either 10 people or 2,000 people, and I've done the range between that, entertain the front row, but watch the back row. Make sure they aren't sleeping, because if they start to go to sleep, then you're not telling the story correctly. So the end result is I now have the reputation as a storyteller, and my straightforward questions get nothing but laughter. That's just the way it is.
And that is going to do it for this week's episode of the Ear to There podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I am so excited to bring you these segments with Bob each and every week. Again, you can call the voice line to get your questions answered by Bob. That phone number, once again, is 267-551-1971. And he told me the last time I talked to him to break out and bring out the off-the-wall questions. So he's ready, willing, and able. Bob is game to answer whatever you're going to throw at him. So thank you so much in advance for calling, for your questions. And Bob, if you are listening to this episode, thank you again so much for agreeing to do this. And I am really happy that you liked the song. Okay, just remember, there will be a new episode of the Ear to There podcast each and every Monday morning, as well as a new episode of the Ear to There podcast, Walt Disney World Word of the Week. And those will be each and every Wednesday morning. So until next time, thank you again so much for listening. Have a phenomenal week. Bye-bye.